Hello, and welcome to another edition of Door County Today. I'm your host, Paul Renier of Door County Nature and Travel. American Folklore Theatre performs all summer under the stars in Peninsula State Park. AFT received the 2012 Wisconsin Department of Tourism Award for Arts, Culture, and Heritage. We'll discover what makes AFT Productions so unique and speak with Secretary of Tourism Stephanie Klett about this prestigious statewide honor. Next, we'll meet with Craig Blietz, an incredibly talented Door County artist whose paintings of Wisconsin cows, yes, cows, have captured the affection and imagination of art lovers and galleries throughout the U.S. Later, we'll go paddleboarding with a Bayshore Outfitters guide, an expert in this new sport. Finally, we'll go to Al Johnson's restaurant in Sister Bay and learn about the history of this revered place with the goats on the roof. And once and for all, find out why they're there. Let's start this month's show with a visit to American Folklore Theatre.
One of the most unique things about musicals that are developed for AFT is that they're tailored for our audience, for our space, and we try to have them be reflective of our culture. So a lot of our musicals do take place in Wisconsin. We also have a limitation, which we prefer to think of as a artistic need, to make sure that it's suitable for people of all ages.
And AFT is so unique in that way, in which you can look across, scan the audience, and there's people, all different ages. They're all going, and it can be very affordable. And they're still seeing professional theater.
Victory Farm started as an idea by the two women writers, Katie Dahl and Emily Colson, who thought it would be interesting to write about this POW experience in Door County.
Emily and I met when we were 11 and 12 years old respectively, and we had both been big AFT fans.
As sometimes happens when two little girls meet on the turf that they both think they have established as their own, there was conflict.
At first, we each thought the other was intruding a little bit on our territory of best AFT volunteer and most fanatical AFT fan.
It took us about a year or two to realize that, oh, actually this other person has many of the same interests outside of AFT and at the theater.
I think that we first had the idea to write a show for AFT sometime around the time that we were finishing college.
We're not actors, we're not going to be performing in AFT shows. How else can we be a part of this theater company? And wouldn't it be neat if we could try writing a show for them?
We decided that it would be fun to write something about cherries because my family has a history of cherry farming.
I had sort of heard a little bit here and there about that there had been German POWs in Door County during World War II.
6 years ago, they came to me with this idea that they wanted to write a story about it. Would I be interested? I said, of course I'm interested. It sounds really, like a good story. And I didn't know anything about that history. So I think that made it even more appealing, is that it happened in our own backyard and we didn't know anything about it.
It really is about reconciliation across cultures. In a time when America is really seriously working on issues of cultural diversity and cultural understanding, it's our opportunity to talk about cross-cultural understanding within a Door County context.
It's not easy to write a script for a musical, because really what you're doing is you're aiming for a story that's being told through music as well as through a script. So you have to write to the songs, and that's something that, takes some practice.
We revised and revised and revised and wrote new songs and wrote new scenes and changed characters and changed sort of what happened within this world we had established.
We interviewed one man who lives in Door County who was a 16-year-old kid who was assigned to drive POWs from where they were sleeping to where they were working. And we also interviewed a 91-year-old man named Werner Krauskopf.
And he called Door County vacation camp. Of all the camps that these POWs were stationed at, they called this one vacation camp because it was, the people were nice, the scenery was beautiful, and the work wasn't too hard.
My character is called Jack Brown, and I'm one of the guards. I am the guard for these 3 POWs that come to work on the cherry orchard. And I'm sort of a comic foil. I'm they call him Stand Around Brown because he doesn't really do much. Except watch the POWs. He doesn't really want to work.
James Velk joined our project in the summer of 2010. Katie and I had both seen his music in other AFT shows, including the Spitfire Grill and we admired it so much. But what James was able to do is take our story and help us create more background for each character, more strength in each scene, just tell the story more clearly through each of the pieces of music.
When they said that James was interested, I said, I think he's going to be your guy. Because James has a lot of experience with writing for musical theater, and specifically writing songs, since he's a composer, but he's also written books.
James Valk actually was a member of AFT's predecessor troupe, the Heritage Ensemble. He and I performed together back in 1983, a very long time ago. He and Fred Alley created a show called The Passage for us back in 1994, and then the show Spitfire Grill, which was performed here several times. So they have a real deep appreciation and background of AFT.
He also has really helped shape the story. He has this wealth of experience in writing shows and knowledge of the sort of canon of what the American musical play is about, and understanding of how it needs to be structured to really function well. And that's an understanding that Emily and I are still coming to have, and we have much less experience with. He's always been so concerned with the central emotional truths of the characters, which is, I think, along with his music, his most valuable contribution.
Say a prayer, say good luck, say good.
Now, Victory Farm, specific place, specific time, specific people, different cultures, all those elements, they make good storytelling.
We want to congratulate American Folklore Theatre for 22 fantastic years of great performances under the stars. This is America's only professional regional theater that solely produces original musicals, 47 to date. And that's why you are the recipient of the Governor's Tourism Award for Arts, Culture, and Heritage. And we couldn't be more thrilled. You really do Wisconsin proud. Congratulations to the American Folklore Theatre for 22 years of great performances under the stars.
You are what you eat, and I spent a tremendous amount of time in my training and to this day studying and looking at the old masters. I grew up always wanting to be involved as an artist in some way, shape, or form. It started when I was a young child, wanting to be a cartoonist. That evolved to an illustrator, and then finally having the guts to go what I really wanted to do, which was the fine art route. I'm fortunate to have a tremendous amount of training. I went to design school in Chicago, and I received my formal academic training in painting and drawing at a small atelier, the School of Representational Art in Chicago. My training is as a figurative painter. I learned to draw and to paint things in a representational manner. And more specifically, my training was in painting the figure. So when I got out of school, one of the first things that I did was I did a lot of portrait work. I did some figure paintings, but mostly portrait. I also was doing some still life. And with time, it seems that I kind of transitioned out of working with the figure and concentrated more on still life. And then in 1995, I started painting cows. That's the first cow painting that I did. Since moving up here, the cow has kind of taken over as my subject matter. Other animals as well, but primarily cows. Humans have a very interesting relationship with cattle. In some cultures, it's sacred. We derive milk, leather, butter, cheese, all these things. Physically, from a formal standpoint, I think that they are beautiful animals in their geometry and their form. They have a very close-cut coat, so you can see that anatomy. You look back in art history at some of the painters that I really like that painted the subject matter that I'm doing right now, cows in landscape. Albert Cuyp, Dutch 17th century. Paulus Potter, 17th century, Dutch painter as well. If you look at their paintings, they're they very much could be set in Door County. Very low horizon line, big sky, cattle throughout. So I think that, again, you are what you eat, and having seen those paintings in the past, the combination of that with where I live and where I work every day influences what I do. I still do still life work, not as much as I used to do, and I still paint the figure, not as much as I used to do. You know, as you can see in the studio here, it's mostly cows. My awareness of Door County and my desire to live in a place like Door County happened at two different times. It started back in 1985, and I had this notion that what I would like to do from a living standpoint would be to live in a barn in a rural area and have my studio in the barn and my living quarters in the barn. But being a city kid, being from Chicago, I had no idea how to facilitate that. An artist friend of mine in Chicago suggested that I come up and introduce myself to an artist up here named Jim Ingwerson. I had never been to Door County before. So it was, I believe it was in September of 1995, and I came up here to visit Jim. He kind of showed me around, and that reignited the fire to this lifestyle. I was struck by the creative possibilities that existed up here, not just through what I saw, but through the people that I met. It was a real magnet, and it really confirmed and made clear to me, you know what you were thinking 10 years ago? This is the place. Right now I'm painting towards two things. I'm a featured artist at Edgewood Orchard, and then I have a one-person exhibition titled Yard. Beyond that, I'm constantly making sketches, doing, filling sketchbooks and getting ready for the next thing. Probably once I deliver the show, I will start the very next day going through the sketchbooks and starting to flush out my next body of work.
I'm Paul Renier with Door County Nature and Travel, and welcome to another segment of The Natural Door. This morning we're in the beautiful village of Ephraim, located in the Bay of Eagle Harbor. This morning we're going to be talking about a new and thrilling sport of paddleboarding. With us, we have Sean Bronner with Bayshore Outfitters, and Sean's going to talk to us a little bit about this new sport and also take me out and try to teach me how to do the paddleboarding. Sean, welcome.
Yeah, good morning, Paul.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for being with us today.
Sure.
And can you tell us a little bit about this sport and why you're interested and why you're doing it?
I'd love to. Well, a lot of people think that the stand-up paddleboard has started in the last 5 years here as a new emerging sport, but it's actually been around for about 1,500 years with the ancient Hawaiian natives. They've been doing the paddles to get from island to island, to go out fishing. So it's just been taken off recently because a lot of celebrities have been using it as a workout. It's got a low impact workout on your body, and it rips your entire core. So it's a really good workout. Cool. So yeah, I'd love to teach you how to paddleboard this morning.
So who would you think are doing paddleboards?
All ages. I mean, everyone from 6 years old to 60 years old.
Okay.
So it's they make specific boards for different types of stability,
okay,
and smaller boards for smaller people too.
Can you tell us a little bit about this board, like some basic parts, like what we should look for?
Absolutely. Well, as you can see, these are the two boards I brought today. This is 11'6" Surf Tech. It's got made of tough light material. You can see it has 3 fins in the back of it besides the one fin. You have the 2 side thrusters. These are going to add stability for the board. This is the main fin. It's a 9-inch fin in the middle, made of a composite material. Yeah, and what happens is this fin slides forward towards the bow of the board and backwards towards the stern of the board. The more back toward the stern the fin is, the straighter your board's going to track. The more forward the fin is, it's more for a playful feel, so that's more of a surf kind of a position for your fin. This is more of the intermediate board. As you can tell, it's a little skinnier. It's 12'1", so it's about 7 inches longer, and it has a single fin in the back. So you're going to sacrifice the stability with the loss of the 2 side fins here. So normally, when you're trying to size yourself for a paddle, you want it to be about 8 inches above your head. So I know this is kind of cliche, but you kind of got the surfer thing going here. That's normally about 8 inches above your head. So I'm standing on a slope here, but you can see that's just about right. Might be like mine, just a little taller, because the reason being is that you don't want to be reaching down, bending your back to try to get your paddle into the water. You want to have straight posture while paddling. So when you're standing on your board, you want to square your feet up. That's hole there in the middle is the absolute center. So you want to get your feet about a little bit farther than shoulder width apart. So this is the paddle then. The scoop is going to go towards the back. You'd think it'd be the other way, but it's kind of like a canoe paddle. It's got a 10-degree bent head on it. So what you're going to do is you want to keep your legs relaxed. A lot of people tend to crunch their toes into the board, but keep your toes really relaxed, because the arc of your feet then will tend to relax and your whole body will. Keep a slight bend in your knees. When you're paddling, you want to pretend like you have a beach ball between the front of the paddle shaft and your chest there. So you want to keep it extended, and you want to grab the T-handle like you have it right there from side to side. So if you want to turn to your right, you're going to put some weight on the right rail, and you're going to kind of do an out swooping with your left, like a brace stroke, exactly. And then just the opposite, if you were to turn to your right, you're shifting your weight to the side that you want to turn on and do a brace stroke. So, and everyone has their own different spot on the board where they like to stand. That hole there in the center, that's just the absolute center. Good idea is to always start off on your knees when you're in the shallows like this. So in case you do feel a little tipsy and you fall in, you don't crank your ankle on one of the rocks here. So keep your feet about shoulder width apart. Good. Excellent. All right. Not that difficult, is it? Oh, that's great.
So when you shift your feet, if I wanted to use, let's say, go back with my weight, you just slowly move back, or?
Yeah, you slowly move backwards.
Up! Back it in!
And I'm on open water right now. You can haul yourself up like that on the back of the board. Pull the board underneath you, just like that.
Thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Sean, for showing me the 101 lesson in paddleboarding.
Sure, you're welcome.
I appreciate it.
Anytime.
If you'd like to learn a little bit more about paddleboarding, take a lesson, visit Bayshore Outdoor Store in Sister Bay, and you could take a lesson and learn this wonderful and fascinating new sport. For more on the natural door, visit doorcountytoday.com. See you next time.
The start of it was, my dad had a partner in the very beginning. And 49, my dad had gone to Marquette, and he came out of the Army Airborne, and he was in Army Intelligence, and that was going to be his degree. In fact, that was his degree after he went to school as well, but he didn't finish. He had a year to go, and the opportunity came, finish school and/or buy this grocery store and turn it into a restaurant. And it worked out. He decided, I'm going to stick this out for a couple more years, and then a couple more, turned into a couple more, and then you got what you got today. They used to have a cabin out in Appleport. Now even I walk out there to this day, and I still feel like I'm 9 or 10 years old. We got old photographs of him where he grew up out there. He was a dog person. All the kids here are animal people. So long before the log building was built here, it was the original restaurant. Looked more like an A-frame or your typical city store, really, but in a small town. I remember the plaques being out front of the provinces in Sweden. I remember my grandfather being here, my grandmother being in the kitchen all the time, meatballs being rolled by hand before the machine came along.
We used to have white tabletops. They used to have big metal pedestals under the tables, and as little kids we used to climb around and bang them with forks and knives, or we'd grab straws and we'd shoot. We thought that the restaurant was like a playground for us.
The counter was still as it is. Even the old wood paneling underneath the counter is the same. I think if you look around, these chairs are the original chairs that I remember. Nothing told you it was a Swedish restaurant from the outside at that time.
I mean, there were times where it's so slow that he would just hang a sign on the door that said, "Gone fishing, help yourself." And there was a can and everybody would just drop money in it. The reason why we have the restaurant today the way it is because of Dean Madden. And Dean would walk by and he'd say, "You ought to build a log restaurant with a sod roof."
They went to Norway and they were introduced to a fellow by the name of Knut Larsen, and they sat down and as my dad used to tell it, on a napkin they sketched out some drawings and a handshake and away they went.
And they built the entire building in Norway first, and everything was delivered here on the date that they needed the logs, and everything was built completely around the old restaurant. We never closed.
No, sir. He's going to build this restaurant around the old restaurant, and we'll disassemble the logs or disassemble the old walls as the new logs went up. We watched the Norwegian carpenters hand carve some of the posts out here with their homemade Norwegian knives that they're very proud of.
I remember the greatest picture ever that I saw was my dad sitting at the very tippy top of the gift shop when the logs were crisscrossed like this, and he's sitting there on top with a little Swedish flag. So it was really neat, and they put it all together and it worked. He had a really good friend, Harold Larsen, who everybody called Winky Larsen. He had the ski hill, North Ski Ridge in Fish Creek. And he and Al were very good friends. And as a joke, every December 9th, he would always get my dad a pet. When Al was redoing the roof, his friend kept saying, "Well, you ought to put a goat up there. You ought to put a goat up there." Every day he'd come and bother Al and tell him, "Well, you ought to put a goat up there." So one day, unbeknownst to Al, Winky went and found a goat, and it was a big billy goat. His name was Oscar.
He actually slung it under his arm and he carried it up the ladder, and this was no small goat. And when he got to the top, the goat leapt to the first sure footing he saw, and Winky went down backwards, and I think he busted several ribs in, and the goat sat there down, looked at Wink Larsen, and that's how the whole thing really started.
So it wasn't for his best friend Wink Larsen, I don't believe that we would have even thought about putting a goat on the roof.
Every once in a while, Al and my dad would get a letter that say, "You know, Mr. Johnson, I want to bring this to your attention. We had a marvelous meal at your place. We went in there, but I think it's terrible about that elderly busboy that runs around there and shouting at all the girls." And he would chuckle and he'd write a letter back and say the elderly busboy was me, Al Johnson, and I apologize if you felt like you were rushed, but we have, June, July, August, September for these people to make their money and us to make our money, and we hope you enjoyed your meal, as it sounds like you did, but by no means do we mean to rush you, but that's just the nature of the business here.
He was in here working, we were in here working, and we didn't complain about it. We just would try to keep up with Al and try to keep up with Ingrid. It's like they were working all the time.
He used to always say, "I want to put Door County on the map or Sister Bay on the map." I think he did. They might not know the name of the restaurant, they might not know, but they do know the place with the goats on the roof no matter where you go. Part of Door County forever,
Thanks for joining us today. Remember to come back often to find out more about Door County's history, landscapes, businesses, and people. I'm Paul Renier for Door County Today. See you next time.